Solar Group presents. This was once just a dream of the skies, the freedom of flight, of round-the-world journeys. Yet we've made it happen. But what did it take? Our dreams became our goals. Our concepts turned into our plans. Our ideas have transformed into a roadmap and production technology. And the years ahead are booked out with development and construction, components and materials, model manufacturing and testing. All this marks the progress from dream to result. Join us on this journey. Solar Group presents a new generation of airships. The best way to predict the future is to create it, so let's do so together.
Hello friends, my name is Pavel Filipov. Next to me is Sergey Semyonov. Good afternoon to everyone. And today, we also have Fyodor Konstantinov joining us for the webinar. Our webinar is dedicated to a wonderful event that you probably already know about, the change of the investment stage in the new Generation Airships project. But since this webinar is generally dedicated to Solar Group and everything we do, of course, we'll talk about the numbers, the AERONOVA Motors project, and we'll answer all your questions regarding any of our projects or Solar Group companies. So you can start writing your questions right now. These questions will be collected from all the platforms where our broadcast is running and sent to us at the end. We will answer all of them. Don't forget that the way our projects develop depends on you. Thanks to your activity, more and more people are finding out about us. So please like, repost, and share the link to this broadcast in the various chats you're part of. Invite your friends here, even if they don't yet know what we do. I think they'll be interested to hear about how innovations are developing in Russia and around the world. And before we start talking about the main topic, what we have to be proud of after almost completing the first stage of funding for the new Generation Airships project. I'd like to share, in general, some of the data we have, so to speak, about the company Solar Group. I want to congratulate you on the fact that we have successfully surpassed the milestone of 80,000 investors. These are the people who support the projects we promote, the ones we invest in ourselves, and that's truly a large number of people. We also have 562,000 registrations. These are people from 194 countries where we are actively working and where the projects we offer are being successfully received, with people eagerly participating in them. I want to say a big thank you to all of you. We feel your support, and it's thanks to you that these projects have the opportunity to come to life. Also, please note, and I want to mention this right at the beginning, that as part of the AERONOVA Motors project, we have launched a promotion where you can purchase packages at the 0 stage. Why am I mentioning this right away? Because we launched the promotion literally at the start of today, and already half of the packages from this promo have been sold. So clearly not everyone will be able to participate. Log into your personal account. There's a special page there where you can read all the details and conditions. You know that in the new Generation Airships project, we have a limited number of shares available, and we stick to that. But there are people who stopped paying their installments, even though at first they seemed ready and took on those commitments. And as we said from the very beginning, we are now reselling these shares without increasing the total number of shares, and a small pool has been allocated for this promo campaign. Why now's time? Because right now, AERONOVA is reaching new milestones, investment is growing even more, and we'll talk about that today as well. We have very ambitious plans for the next stage, which will require investments. That's why the stage change, along with this promo, I think will give us the financial boost we need right now. And now I'd like to hand things over to Sergey Semyonov so he can tell us how things are going, what's happened recently, and what our goals are for the near future.
All right, colleagues, good afternoon once again. My presentation will be divided into 3 parts. First, I'll briefly talk about the situation at LLC Sovelmash. Then I'll discuss how the first stage went at AERONOVA, that is, in the new Generation Airships project. And I'll give you a broad overview, in numbers, plans, and objectives, of what the second stage of the AERONOVA project will look like. Let's get started. So, regarding LLC Sovelmash, as you all know, since December of last year, we've been waiting to receive the CCR. Unfortunately, summer has already arrived, and unfortunately, even though we've corrected all the revisions 1,000 times, we still haven't received it from the government agency. Because of this, we can't start commercial operations yet, even though we're fully prepared for it. Let me remind you, the building is finished. It's equipped with all the necessary machinery. Clients are ready. Specialists are ready. The only thing is, the company just can't conduct commercial activities. So, moving forward, everything is still on track as planned to start generating profit. I've said this many times before, but I'll say it again. Here's what we'll be doing in the near future. We are waiting to receive the CCR. After we get the certificate of completion for the construction, we'll submit an application for the permit to begin operations. That's when the State Commission confirms that everything required is in place and that we can officially start working. So, the first step, getting the CCR, means changing the status from an unfinished construction project to a real estate asset. Then, for this facility, specifically the plant you see in the footage, in order to start operations, we need to obtain the permit to begin using it. After that, we purchase the land where the plant currently stands, which is now leased, at a very, very low price, transfer it into company ownership, and add it to the company's balance sheet. We assess the enterprise, evaluate the intangible assets, contribute all of this to the company, and after that, we carry out the company's reorganization. At the same time, commercial operations begin, and the company starts moving towards self-sufficiency. So, within a year from the moment we receive the CCR, as we previously stated, we plan to stop funding the company so that it can start generating its own income, become self-sustaining, and begin earning profits for the investors. After that, we carry out the reorganization, issue shares, and these shares, in proportion to the investors' stakes, will be transferred to them. This will happen within roughly these time frames. As for LLC Sovelmash, that's all I have to say. Now let's move on to the airships, the most interesting part, and what's happening right now. Let me remind you that our entire project, which I announced and prepared in August of last year, moved to the first stage on March 4th, so that was just a few months ago. It might seem that all this has been buzzing around the internet for a long time. So, on March 4th, we moved to the first stage of new generation airships. At that time, Pasha, Fedia, and I got together, held a webinar, and explained what the company is about and what the goals are for the first stage. Let me remind you that the goal for the first stage was defined both in terms of money and in terms of what we needed to accomplish. At that time, we stated that the amount needed to be raised for the first stage should be between $2.5 and $5 million. Today is June 17th, and it's now 5 p.m. The total amount of investments that have come into the company is $5,060,000. Out of this amount, $3 million came in during our zero stage. In other words, the plan for the zero stage was roughly $2.5 million, but we raised $3 million, and at this point, it has kind of balanced out. But I want to point out that today is only the middle of the month, and already this month we've received $500,000. So I'm more than confident that starting this month, the company will reach the level of attracting over $1 million a month. This is actual money that has come in. At the same time, we have a concept of installment plans and the volume of commitments that investors have taken on. You can see this chart now, although I think the bottom one isn't the right one. Anyway, at this point, people have signed up for $13 million in installment plans. As of today, The number of investors in new generation airships is 7,238 people, and the number of active investors who are paying in installments is 5,150 people. At the same time, the number of investment packages purchased is 7,811, which means that people are buying more than once. They're making multiple purchases as they see how the company operates. I think this overall information environment is a huge achievement for all the investors, because people are sharing information, and in essence, it's their energy that fuels this entire project. So accordingly, let me remind you that at the moment we've just launched a promotion, because right now we have a number of financial goals that require us to raise a certain amount of money quickly. We're running the promotion that Pavel mentioned. The installment plans that became available from the first and zero stages at a discount. We've released a limited number of them in order to meet our targets. So, if you add the current amount to the $3.5 million from the zero stage, we should reach about $5.5 to $6 million. But I'm confident that we'll actually surpass that. In other words, from a financial standpoint, there are no concerns at all. Now, let's talk about what was accomplished in the first stage from a technical perspective, and so on. Well, you've probably seen the biggest achievement of our entire technical team, all our engineers, the launch of Russia's very first fully functional unmanned airship. That is, the Nova 01 airship, which we launched in the Moscow region and which you've probably seen many times, is our very first one. It's a test platform where we work out the main control technologies, shell welding, onboard computers, engines, how all of these components interact. Congratulations to everyone, I want to say. As I already mentioned in the announcement, soon you'll be able to come and see it for yourselves. Everyone who visits, just like me and the whole team, is amazed by what's been accomplished. So, after the first stage, we went from being a company that just rented an office and hired people, to a company that has produced its first fully functional flying machine, developed a range of technologies, and in doing so, proved that it's established and capable of creating real, tangible things. In addition to that, we launched a stratospheric device, which Fyodor will talk about in more detail. We're preparing for small-scale production, and because of that, I started working with potential clients, initially focusing on advertising placement on airships. We are also now in concrete negotiations with potential clients who want to order a fleet of airships from us. These won't be small, they're cargo unmanned airships. This will happen a bit later, but the fact is, negotiations are underway. People are coming to us. We're talking with them. I can't disclose which company it is, but everything has already started. Another important highlight for me was officially signing a cooperation agreement with Bonka. Now we can fully collaborate with their engineers, their audience, their assets, their funds, and so on. You've probably already seen this in AERONOVA news as well. Our activity has notably led to us catching the attention of the federal media. Maybe you've already seen this too. Reporters from NTV came to us. They were the first company to come, film everything, and present it. You know how it is. Sometimes companies reach out and do some commercial stories and so on. In our case, though, they were just looking for a story. They reached out to us, and our team presented everything to them, showed them around, and so on. So these are the pillars that our first stage was built on. Now, regarding the second stage, we've all grown, and the goals for this stage are bigger. The second stage will also last 3 to 4 months. The main goal, financially, which I'm responsible for, is to secure $5 million in investments, because we're starting to face larger expenses at this stage. Secondly, during this stage, we'll prepare and launch a Russian crowd investing platform, registered with the central bank. Right now, we're operating in Russia through the foreign company SOLARGROUP. In Russia, we're creating another company that will be licensed by the central bank. In other words, we've already bought and set it up, and now we're just about to launch it for Russian investors. Next, as I've mentioned before, this restructuring process is just taking longer than expected. We'll set up several companies within the group for different purposes. One of the major areas we're developing right now is setting up our own shell production facility. That means we're purchasing fabrics, equipment, and setting everything up in a dedicated space. We already have the specialists we need so we can produce large shells at minimal cost, run small production batches, and so on. We still plan to expand internationally, gradually. We have an offer, an initiative to present in Dubai. The exhibition will take place in November. I should probably also talk about the Ealing here. Oh, and of course, it's also important to mention that we're currently looking for large hangars. I went to Tolyatti with Fedia. We could even show some footage of us checking out options, building them ourselves, but in the current situation, that would probably take a really long time. So, as a result, we have people stepping up, for example, Oleg, who simply offered his own facility for us to set up the airship production and testing. Right here and now, at this very moment, we're actively looking for similar offers. Well, that's pretty much all the main and important stuff. We're preparing various promo materials, which you can check out on our websites. Maybe the guys will show you some of them today. So, work is being done in all areas, financial, technical, legal, and so on. That's all, Semyonov. The report is finished. I'll hand it over to Pavel now, and Pavel should call in Fyodor.
Yes. Sergey, thank you very much. Everything was clear and to the point. We look forward to seeing you again in webinars and videos. Before Fyodor starts, I ask you all to be active. Just a reminder, yes, please like and share. All of this helps promote our broadcast. Especially since we have such great news today, and AERONOVA really has something to show, because the company that actually has flying aircraft is, of course, on a whole different level. So, Fedya, that's exactly where I'd like to start. Please tell us about probably the most exciting event, the launch of the first aircraft. Give us some details. How did it all happen? What challenges did you face? And in the end, what was achieved and why? Why was it launched?
Hello everyone. Why was it launched? Because the guys who were developing the control system finished it a bit faster than we were able to set up the shell production and everything else. So, in order to test everything in advance, we decided to quickly build a small aircraft. And yes, it just so happened that we managed to make it during the very first stage. This is a small replica, just to remind you, of the Nova 2 airship, which is equipped with the same number of engines, and the engine thrust is comparable to its frontal resistance. In other words, it mimics the dynamics of the larger craft, and the main steering device is also similar in power, so this is a small-scale version of what we plan to build by the end of this year. And we built this small replica, yes, we got it up in the air. It's our very first craft, and honestly, it's a really awesome event. After it took off, a lot of people stopped asking what exactly we're working on. It's airships, after all, ones that actually fly and are being assembled. We've put together a team. Designers are designing, engineers are developing the technology, and the production crew is building. Right now, you're seeing a video. The assembly process is still being handled by the same people, the designers and engineers. But overall, it's a really valuable experience, because besides the airship industry veterans, the company also has some younger team members. But actually, they're not that young, everyone's already an adult, they're just new to aeronautics specifically. And that hands-on experience on the ground, gained during the assembly of this small airship, its near-ground operation, and its flights, was something the whole team needed. And right now, literally today, he's sending a video, maybe I'll drop it in the chat, flight tests are underway, and it's not like in the previous video where we were controlling it with ropes. Now it's already flying freely, and as for the new generation, we currently have a high school student who came to us for an internship and is also actively involved in all of this.
He's continuing the engineering school of airship building.
Of course, it's really awesome that the younger generation is getting interested. And one of the missions accomplished by the Nova 01 airship is that it managed to attract attention, not only from serious professionals and clients, but also from students and school children. Everyone is very eager to get involved in the development process.
By the way, speaking of attracting attention, let's show the footage from WordStat. We pulled some statistics here, and we were curious to see whether, after we started working with airships and the company AERONOVA appeared, people began mentioning it more often on the internet. And according to the statistics, yes, we can see that mentions have indeed increased. Well, with AERONOVA it's pretty clear. There was no company before, and then it appeared. But even on the graph for airships, we can clearly see that there's been growth. So, the project has really inspired a huge number of people. Because, as we've said many times, besides the people who genuinely want to use airships for business or for their own personal purposes, there are also a lot of dreamers who just want this to finally become available to everyone. And when they see that it's becoming accessible, their reaction matches that.
Well, in aeronautics, yeah, there's kind of a historical fate. Every project was a people's project. It was supported by the public. And in many countries, you really need to study the history more closely.
So tell me, can we say that the tests are going well? What kind of conclusions can we draw?
Well, look, what does going well mean? I mean, it flies, that's obvious. No one's going to cancel Archimedes' laws. After all, the fact that the control system works, that's also a fact. The fact that we've established communication with a remote operator, we haven't shown that yet, but that's all been worked out too. So our airship, using 4G through cell towers with minimal delays, something like 100 milliseconds, I think, transmits all its data, video from 5 cameras. Everything you see around it in 360 degrees, and it's remotely controlled. So, whether you're in the office or out in the field, it works just the same. Right now, at this very moment, we're testing the systems for issuing flight missions automatically. There are guys out in the field, and there's an operator with a remote control. You can take over control or hand it back to the airship itself, meaning it can operate autonomously. Although now it's not really clear where the airship actually is, because there's a computer hanging in the air, a cloud server is doing calculations, and servers inside the office are also processing data. So, we need to talk to Dima Orlov to figure out where the main brain is. Actually, I figured it out recently. So it turns out that our main brain is actually the one that's in the air, because it makes all the decisions right there on the spot, but the most powerful one is the one in the office, and the cloud server is just a backup, just in case. So yes, basically the airships are up in the air, and right now they're testing the systems. So, once again, there's an operator with a remote control and another operator with a tablet, and on the tablet, the flight mission is given as a command, for example, to hover at a specific point by coordinates at a certain altitude to hold that position. Everything is recorded, what the airship is doing up there, what's happening in the air, whether the task is being completed or not. Then the point changes. For example, now we fly over here. So today, they're conducting tests of this kind.
Fedya, you just mentioned that tests are happening today, and actually, Ruslan sent me a video, which they're about to play. So, if I understand correctly, these are the very tests taking place right now?
Yes, we're flying there right now. There's a light drizzle, a bit of wind, but honestly, we got tired of waiting.
This isn't professional footage, right? It's just the guys who are on site today filming with their phones to show how everything is going.
Yeah, anyone living here in Moscow or the Moscow region knows what the weather's been like. Sometimes it's windy, sometimes there's hail, sometimes heavy rain. Basically, according to the elders, the weather wasn't suitable for flying, but we went ahead anyway. Because it's time.
Fedya, can you briefly tell us a bit more about the control system? As I understand it, this is a really serious development that very few companies have. From what I gather, our system was written entirely from scratch.
Look, any manufacturer of equipment that, in other words, essentially has a brain, has a control system. Most of the time, the manufacturer develops it themselves because they are the ones who put in all the components, the actuators, mechanisms, controllers. They build all of that in, and only they truly understand the logic behind how their device should be controlled. For example, when the project is large and there's a lot of funding, in general, there are a few more possibilities. There's an opportunity to create a team of dedicated specialists who will document all the logic and then hand it off to someone on the outside, someone more professional, let's say, who will handle everything on an outsourced basis. It takes longer, it's more expensive, but that's also how it's done sometimes. Basically, we took the shortcut. We just brought in specialists who know what they're doing and built it ourselves, because no one but us would understand the logic behind how our device is controlled. So, the control system is built, and honestly, there's nothing really complicated about it. Any self-respecting engineer or engineering team should be able to do this.
Well, as they say, nothing is difficult if you have a few top-notch specialists who know how to build a control system. They'll definitely get it done. But that's really a matter of having the right team. When you have a team, of course, everything is much easier. So, tell me, when do we plan to announce that the specific tests for this device are finished, and we've achieved what we set out to do?
Listen, when it comes to our team, here's how it goes. We simply bring people on as needed. When a specific need arises, a particular task, we hire a specialist or a contractor for that task, and so on. And right now, there's a growing need for specialists, for test pilot engineers. Basically, we need a flight test complex. because it's become a bit difficult for us to keep running back and forth between the office and the airfield, since we have to time things with the weather, and we also need to keep things moving with the other devices, and so on. So, to answer your question, the testing of this little device isn't going to end anytime soon. We need to keep flying, logging more and more flight hours. So, we can confidently say that yes, it flies, yes, everything works, but it needs to keep flying. It needs to fly. The computer needs to be tested in flight. The system engineers need to clean up the system, maybe upgrade something here and there. The dynamics specialists need to fine-tune the dynamics. In other words, the device needs to stay in the air. And for that, we need additional specialists who will basically just log flight hours, carefully test the devices, closely monitor their time in the hangar, and also maintain their overall condition.
So, we say that we have our first flying device, but actually, strictly speaking, it's not the first, because it's very stratospheric, and there was already a successful launch.
Talking airship, yes, it's the first.
It's the first airship, yes, but let's also talk a little about the stratosphere. So, we managed to carry out a successful launch. What did we ultimately achieve, and what is the ongoing purpose of this work overall?
Well, yes, the stratosphere is still within Archimedes' domain. The lift is created by the same lifting gas. It's just that the devices fly a bit higher. This niche is very interesting from a commercial standpoint for large corporations and governments. Remote sensing of the Earth using stratospheric probes can be done dozens of times more effectively than with satellites. There's the matter of resolution, the number of pixels per square meter. And it's obvious to everyone that with stratospheric probes, the number of pixels will be much higher. And now, satellite technology has more or less reached its limits, so everyone is turning their attention to the stratosphere. There are companies in the world that launch weather balloons, but that's a bit different. Many militaries launched various long-duration stratospheric probes during the Cold War, mainly between the United States and the Soviet Union. Then those programs were scaled back. Recently, Google alone relaunched this kind of program. They plan to create stratospheric probes to provide connectivity in regions where, for example, there is no internet. That includes Equatorial Africa, Latin America, and so on. Overall, things were going quite well for them, but for a number of reasons unrelated to the technology, more to do with management and so forth, the program was ultimately shut down. And interestingly, our specialists from AERONOVA were actively involved in this program. Vadim Zukovich worked directly on this program on Google alone. And now everyone is coming back to the stratosphere again, realizing that these vehicles are needed. The only thing that's needed is to invest in the evolution of this vehicle. The technology should be controllable as a stratospheric airship. What we launched was an uncontrollable probe. We would get caught in a stratospheric current and circle around in the polar vortex. We wanted to go around the pole, but we didn't quite make it because the vortex shifted, so we passed close to the pole instead. This method of flight is suitable, for example, for communication purposes, but for monitoring, of course, it would be better if the device could learn to hover. To achieve this, it needs to be controlled in terms of altitude and also equipped with propulsion systems. And this is the direction we are actively pursuing. We have signed a broad agreement of cooperation and partnership with Bauman University in this area. So, about our joint work. When we started all of this, from the very beginning, we were already working with the guys from Bauman University, with Arkady Ditkovsky. No engineering center at Bauman University, just a student club of shared interests. And thanks to our joint efforts, it turned out that now it's an engineering center within the institute. We have comprehensive agreements with them. Basically, there's a shared roadmap for the ongoing and collaborative development of this technology. We even have a fairly detailed and comprehensive idea of where it will be used commercially, specifically the one we're currently making plans for. We're going to increase the capacity, increase the payload, add more control features, equip it with various sophisticated components, with different types of ballast tanks, discrete, permanent, or single-use ones, valves, and a whole lot more, basically. The device needs to be upgraded to the point where it can confidently stay in the air for months at a time, for example, and also remain within designated areas. That's when it will truly become an absolutely remarkable breakthrough in our Russian stratospheric history, for sure. And on the international stage, it will set an important precedent, making a clear and unmistakable statement that we are, without question, a serious player globally. A truly serious scientific and technological company, fully capable of taking on such challenges and making them happen. At this point, you can't even see how many processes we've developed and how much we've planned ahead. There are no obstacles left to making it a reality. This year, we'll already see significant breakthroughs in this area, and next year it's quite likely that we'll even see the first trial, small, but still stratospheric airships. Because even a probe, let's say, equipped with engines that can move against the stratospheric wind and has its own direction, that means it's controllable, and that's exactly what dirigible means, controllable. That's great. This is something we can already show, and it's not the only thing that work has been done on. This is just a small piece of the iceberg that's visible, but in reality, work is already underway on all the other devices as well. On both Nova 2 and Nova 35 and all the others. Can you talk more about that too? What's being done? When will we be able to see something big? Something big. When we set up shell production, that's what we specifically plan to focus on in the second stage, in particular. Yes, one of the major milestones of the first stage is that we've developed the next shell for a small airship. This isn't a Nova 01. Nova 01 is actually a dynamic model of the Nova 2 airship, while this is the commercial version of a small drone. We've developed a shell for it, a shell for the Nova 2 airship, and a shell for the Nova 8 airship, all carefully designed. And for these shells, we've put together, well, a developed shell isn't just a shell. It has a lot of different components, both structural and load-bearing. Inside the shell itself, there are various belts, ballonets, all the actuators, and so on, which are attached to the shell, so there are mounting points and a lot of other interesting things. The airship is built on the shell. All these shells were developed, and a complete set of equipment was selected for their production, with the technological processes established, down to the needles, literally everything. Basically, we've put together the entire list, and now procurement has begun for the second stage. The main task now is to equip this production, get it fully up and running, and staff it with employees. Not many people, all are in mind. The most important thing is that we have a manager for this production. It's a big stroke of luck that we brought him in at the very first stage. He got involved and said, "All right, let's do this." We keep coming back to the team, the AERONOVA team. What does it look like today? How many people are there? What departments do you have? Who does what? A lot of people are building the airship, and not just one. I'll get back to that in a bit. Let me talk about the envelope production first. The main task, if we want to see something big flying, is that we really need to set up envelope production, because no one else but us will make the airship envelope. So all the equipment will be purchased and set up. Yes, for now the fabrics will be imported, but negotiations are underway to produce our own domestic fabric specifically for this purpose. The requirements are being clarified and formed. In general, the whole process is being launched. As soon as the envelope production is up and running, we'll see a series of small, but still significant, developments. We'll then start producing a series of small, unmanned airships with a form factor that is roughly similar to the Nova 01, though, as you'll notice, it's a bit different in some aspects. And we'll create the envelope for the Nova 2 airship that will be accomplished during this stage.
So this envelope production that you and Sergey are talking about is probably the most crucial task for moving forward.
Of course. Even though we've mapped out the company's path toward large rigid airships with a hard shell, that path goes through creating airships with a soft envelope first. Not having envelope making when making airships with a soft envelope is absurd. So yes, production is a very important milestone, and during this stage we need to fully establish it. Once we do, we'll have complete freedom to manufacture envelopes of any shape, size, or volume.
And we also discussed the idea that, since we can already do small-scale production, we could even supply these vehicles to our partners in other countries so that they can operate and showcase them as well. I understand this is necessary for further certification and for AERONOVA's international development. So are we making this a goal now too?
Yes, Sergey Semyonov came up with this task, this idea, that we need to, in fact, send each national representative a small airship like this one. Because talking about airships is one thing, but seeing them and being present during their flight is something completely different. And yes, in the context of developing the international business specifically, looking for a client for an airship while actually having an airship, it's like...
It's a little bit easier.
Yes, you'll, for sure, feel more confident, both you and the potential buyer.
Yes, and I'd like to emphasize here that some people look at this and say, great, you guys have airships flying in Russia now, but what does that do for us? And here I want to emphasize that AERONOVA is, of course, currently focused on Russia one way or another, because that's where the main brains are. The team is here, but the business will be in all countries. It will be international. There is already an understanding of what this could look like. For example, today Sergey was talking about creating a holding structure. All of this will make it possible to operate in different countries, comply with local laws, and also address issues like certification, like some people ask, will they actually allow us to fly? For flight, follow a procedure, then get permission. This is the first step.
Yeah, there's a lot to do, a ton of plans. Now we just have to make it happen. That's why, based on our national offices, we will, in particular, be establishing and setting up working groups. Within each country, these groups will determine procedures and fine-tune them from an organizational standpoint. We'll definitely test all of this out carefully on small devices first.
And in the initial stage, when we were buying equipment, was that part of the shell production?
No, in the initial stage we were buying metal cutting machines. We bought a lathe milling machine, a milling machine, a 5-axis machine, and an EDM machine. Overall, it's an excellent investment in production equipment. Secondly, this gives us more freedom when it comes to quickly making small parts, brackets, bushings, and so on. And yes, trying to build airships without a machine shop just means you end up being a customer for someone else's airships again.
By the way, Sergey just messaged me, Semyonov. He says there are 51 people working. Mention that. 51 people is already a big team, right, Fyodor?
Yeah, it's a big team, but we haven't even reached 1/6 the size of the team that launched the -12 Australian dollars and -30 Australian dollars in Russia. Yes, for now we're still sticking to a strategy based on necessity, but if we've taken on an industry that needs to be built from scratch, then eventually thousands of people will be working. So right now, we're just at the very beginning, like a little stream. Regarding the industry, Sergey points out that, in order to think on an industry-wide scale, we've already started the process of forming an association, a step that is, in particular, quite significant. This is a legal entity, which is an organization or institution that possesses certain rights and functions, especially on larger platforms. For example, this can be seen when such entities are involved in working with states, governments, and other similar large-scale organizations, and so on. An individual legal entity is not a player, but an association is. Creating an association for aeronautical technology and its manufacturers is our mission. So, during this stage, we hope to definitely make this happen. That way, we'll become even more official, even more serious. And this will, without a doubt, be a statement to a much wider audience.
So, tell us about the land, what Sergey mentioned, and when you and Oleg went to check it out. Why does the company need it, and what goals are you planning to achieve there?
It's simple. To build an airship, you need a place to build it. And for that place to work, it has to meet certain requirements, right? So then you have a choice. Either we buy something ready-made, we rent something ready-made, or we design and build our own facility. These options can be combined, as there are many tasks, like setting up the metalworking. It's on our premises, but the space isn't enough. Setting up the shell production also requires space. You can weld the shell, for example, in rooms with low ceilings, but if you need to pressurize it or inflate it, even just with air, then you need much higher ceilings. After all, these are airships. Next, once we've welded the shell and pressurized it, we need to deflate it, vacuum it, and transport it to the assembly site where the airship will be put together. The assembly will take place somewhere with gates that can be opened so the airship can be rolled out onto the airfield and, of course, take off. So, you need a sufficient number of specialized facilities, and we decided not to just rush in headfirst, like, let's just buy some land right now or immediately build a hangar. There are more optimal solutions. After all, there are many different buildings and structures throughout the country, so we're carefully determining and figuring out exactly which ones best suit our needs, and who is willing to host us and get involved with the project. So, the work is ongoing. But Nova 2 is actually designed in such a way that it can be housed in standard aviation hangars, the same ones where Boeings are stored, the ones people fly on vacation. So yes, we can use those for assembling the airship, and most likely, that's exactly what we'll do. Because that hangar will be located right on the grounds of an airfield, it obviously won't be set up inside the city limits. But when it comes to building a large rigid airship, whether we want to or not, and of course we do, and we'll have to construct a new hangar for that. And right now, we're currently in the process of carefully selecting the land where this important construction will, in fact, actually take place.
Well, like we said at the beginning, maybe we'll buy, maybe we'll lease.
Yes. There were some ideas and pretty good options for acquiring existing airfields, but neither of them worked out. That means they just weren't meant for us. What can you do? There's nothing to be done about it. So now we're taking a few different approaches. We're looking for something that's already ready to go, because for the initial stages, something ready-made is enough for us. But at the same time, there's a lot of work being done for that bigger, long-term plan. There are a lot of partners who say, yes, I have land, let's use mine. With those partners, we've started the process. Basically, we submit information about the proposed construction site to the relevant authorities and find out whether it's possible for us to allocate some kind of flight zone there in the future, to set up an airfield and so on, because the relevant authorities often don't know what's happening right under their noses. And then a team of specialists comes in and says, we actually want to set up an airfield here. They'll say it's not possible to do that here. So we're sorting things out, looking for options, and of course, we need to hurry, because the project was given 5 years, 9 months have already passed, and construction itself will take quite a long time.
It's already been said that one of the main tasks is shell-based production, but there's also the goal of making several new devices. So, as I understand it, some of them are small, and we also need to upgrade the current ones we've just seen to a commercial version. What else? Will we maybe see something already flying? Something airborne?
In the second stage, we'll only see the small commercial version of this one. You can't really call it Nova 01. It's basically just a small unmanned airship, a commercial version, and maybe even a series. We'll see. It depends on how quickly production is set up and depends on how fast we can attract funding.
Well, I'm coming back here, friends, to that promo I mentioned right at the beginning. It's not by chance that we organized it, and notice that it's limited. Yes, we're planning to raise a maximum of $500,000 as part of this promo. We launched it today. And just today, literally within a few hours, the cheapest $500 packages in this promo were already sold out. Didn't have time to blink. When I checked, none were left. Asked if it was a glitch. Told me everything was bought. Other packages sold quickly. Only 257 packages, half sold that day. That's exactly why we're running this promo, as an addition to the change in the investment stage, which is when we usually see more investments coming in. This is exactly what Fyodor was talking about, and Sergey mentioned it as well. Shell production, new equipment, and in general, there are a lot of tasks that can be solved with money, quickly resolving certain issues so we can move forward faster. That's why this directly affects how fast the project develops. It really depends on how quickly we can all get organized on this particular matter. So, as they say, if you care and want to invest on the best terms, remember, like I said, there really aren't many packages left. This isn't some trick. That's just how it is. So right now, go ahead and get the packages at the 0 stage, because if things keep going like they did today, by tomorrow evening there won't be any left. Remember, they're still available.
Transfer money for machines in 2 days?
Well, I'd love for things to move that quickly.
Absolutely. Money speeds up a lot of things. Right now, for example, our hands are tied. We have to make choices, because every process you start has its own timeline for completion. Even just buying fabric, we picked it out and paid for it ages ago, but it only arrived yesterday or the day before. And right now, we're not even ordering the next batch of fabric for producing the small serial devices. We're gathering data about the equipment. Ideally, if we had the money, we would have already ordered the fabric and the components, and by the time production was set up, everything would be in the warehouse, ready for us to quickly assemble and release them. Right now, we're just waiting. We can't afford to do that.
And regarding Nova 2, do we have any clear timelines now? Maybe at least for ground tests or something physical like that?
Well, look, everything is still taking shape as we go. The first, so to speak, flying laboratory, you could say. It's an unfinished commercial vehicle, specifically the envelope from the Nova 2 airship, the engine from Nova 2, the swivel transmission, duct fan engines, the control system, the fuel system, the whole aviation setup. But without the gondola, without the passenger seats, the fancy ones that were drawn up, even without a pilot, it could take to the air this year. Yeah, but again, it's basically a flying laboratory, not a commercial vehicle, but it will already be very close to an unmanned commercial craft. But it's still quite away from a piloted passenger version, because a piloted passenger version is a bit more complicated, takes a bit longer. You have to get the seat upholstery just right.
It's comfortable.
Well, in general, the requirements for air transport carrying people on board are really strict. And just putting together a craft and flying it, well, that's what we do. We build it and we fly. It's just that there are a number of challenges, yes. I mean real challenges. Like it's hard to put together. From the current selection of components, something like the power supply system, for example. You know, we chose engines that don't really want to come to our country, since they're made in other countries that aren't too eager to send them here. The generators, for example, that will be installed on this engine are the same way. Basically, everything has to be aviation grade, everything has to be certified, and so on and so forth. With drones, everything's easier.
Vedya, is there anything else you'd like to add? We were also talking about the team earlier. I don't know how interesting this is anymore, since things like renting out spaces and the team growing are pretty much common knowledge. But maybe there's something specific you'd like to point out. What kind is AERONOVA becoming?
Look, AERONOVA is becoming more engaged in its own processes. When we first rented the office, there was still this lingering trend of remote work. A lot of people thought it might be possible to build an airship remotely, like from home. And honestly, there were some illusions about that within the team. But fortunately, those illusions were shattered by reality, an inspiring, positive, and motivated reality. Right now, the office is actually full of people who are actively working. New people keep joining, engineers, specialists, the ones who actually build and design specific components and mechanisms. Everyone needs workspaces, desks, computers, and so on. Plus, we also need to buy machines and equipment. So yeah, it's starting to feel a bit cramped. We're expanding a little. We just rented a couple more offices on the same floor to fit everyone in. But it's not like you just sit down and stay in one place. For the most part, we're like a migrating flock. Everyone works in the office. Every bit of space is being used. Not a single inch is left idle.
Well, is there anything else? Or do you think we've covered the main points? At least the basics. If so, we can move on to questions, right?
The main thing is that the team is working. The airships are flying, even the small ones, though the small ones are considered playthings for the wind. The bigger the craft, the more stable it will be. We're working on the development of large airships specifically. To move on to their production in the second phase, it's necessary to set up a facility for manufacturing the envelopes. The metalworking part is ready, and some components are even being partially produced there. After the Nova 2 project, we have another airship, which we called Nova 8. Nova 8 might keep its name. Maybe Nova 7 or Nova 9. But we've already started actively working on it, basically on creating it, because the clients Sergey mentioned are specifically interested in this size class. There's a specific request regarding payload capacity, range, and in general, the functions it needs to perform, and that's a good thing. As I've already mentioned in a previous webinar, our aeronautics experts had previously given their assessment of which size range would be in demand. And the fact that this matched the requirements of current, actual customers was just great to see. It shows that we're dealing with real experts, that we're on trend, and that everyone understands and is aware of what's needed. And work has started on the Nova 8. I'm just gradually leading up to the point that the power unit we didn't talk about at first was, in fact, actually developed specifically for devices the size of the Nova 8. Work on it is also actively underway. It's been fully designed, and the metalworking production, which is tailored for it as well, has already started manufacturing parts, components, and so on. And by the end of this year, maybe even in the fall, we'll already see all of this in hardware, how it's going to be assembled. If we manage to launch the unit this year, it'll definitely be a big win.
So, when will there be any details?
You can't see it, right? It's not in the frame, so the details will come later.
So it's unclear, but within the AERONOVA framework and...
Look, aviation experts know. What's an airplane? Helicopter or airship without an engine? There's a challenge with engines right now. Yeah, and we were really lucky that a large team, who had spent their whole lives working on these systems, became available and were looking for something to do. In other words, looking for a place to put their talent to use. And this team turned out to be a perfect fit for our project, and their developments fit as well. So everything was put together right at the very start of the project. The team was fully staffed and working, and it's really nice to see how the engine, down to every bolt, every part, every flange, is already modeled in 3D. All the mathematical models have been worked out, all the gas dynamics refined and thermal aspects addressed. Right now, work on the dimensional chains is being completed, and tolerances and fits are being specified for every part, which are gradually being handed over to production. This is also a huge amount of work, mostly invisible, but truly massive. If everything goes as planned, and I hope it does, it will definitely be a breakthrough.
All right, so I suggest we move on to the questions. There are actually a lot of questions, and I think these questions will help shed a bit more light on what we've been talking about. Fedia, let me go ahead. I have a list of questions here, and I'll start by reading out the ones specifically about airships. After that, I can answer the rest myself, the ones about SOLARGROUP and any other topics. And friends, please don't forget to support us. Remember, likes and shares are always appreciated. By doing this, you're also helping yourselves, especially if you're already investors, because the faster the project moves forward, the more everyone who's invested or supported it will benefit. That's why, as they say, with crowdfunding, in a sense, we're carefully forging our own happiness, step by step, with our own hands. At the same time, keep in mind that if you're planning to invest yourself right now, just in addition to the promotion I mentioned, we also have several other very interesting special offers in our current portfolio. So, check out the promotions section in your personal account. Every investor will find something there to make their investment even more profitable. Right now, there's a very interesting promotion currently ongoing for partners, where they can earn additional referral rewards when their downline partners achieve a new partnership status. If you know what I'm talking about, then this is definitely for you. The SOLARGROUP partnership business hasn't gone anywhere, And it's truly a powerful mechanism that has already proven its effectiveness and reliability, no matter how skeptically some people might view it. There are skeptics out there, we all know them by name, but the fact is, this mechanism really works. Thanks to it, we're able to launch projects like this together. Just a reminder, we're checking questions on all the platforms where the broadcast is happening, so feel free to keep sending them in. I hope we'll be able to answer all of them. There are a ton of questions. Thank you so much for being so active. And here comes the first question. Actually, there are several, so I'll group them together. People are asking about the cost price of the airship, its payback period, whether we have any specific calculations available, or maybe if they're available somewhere publicly. And if there's any information that people can use regarding this, for example, any details or data that might be helpful.
Of course we do. This isn't some brand new device with unclear functions or uncertain consumer qualities. It's a well-known and widely recognized product that has been proven over time to perform a clear and specific function reliably. There is a defined market for this product, and its particular set of features is intentionally designed to meet the needs and preferences of consumers who are specifically seeking what this product offers. It turns out that in the complex current situation we are facing, the capitalist or market economy model, as we know it, whatever you prefer to call it, essentially means that in practice, demand is ultimately what truly drives supply and shapes the market. In other words, it's not like I can just make something, set a price, and say I want it to cost this much. No, right now it's all about the market situation. If we're entering the service sector, say transportation and logistics, then we have to meet the expectations of that market. We can't just say we'll transport a ton for more money or take longer to do it. There are certain expectations, after all, and it's to meet those expectations that these devices are created. They're created to meet those expectations. So, we honestly can't make it out of some unbelievably cool, super expensive materials with all sorts of strange features and properties. Not in this case. Basically, right from the very beginning, all of the development and design processes are always carefully and thoughtfully carried out in such a way that the device perfectly fits the market. The market, specifically for those who are in these transportation and logistics businesses, for example. So there's a clear request from them. If we can solve these specific tasks using your devices, we'll buy them. So it's our job to ensure that the production cost, along with the company's profit, is set up in such a way that we make money and the device meets the customer's expectations. I mean, when you really think about it, what other kind of economic model could possibly exist or be considered in this particular case or situation? It's shaped by the market, not by us. The only thing we can shape is our strategy. And the strategy is, for example, if we start producing small airships now, meaning drones, they also have a clear, well-defined market. A market that is clearly defined. If you're lifting, say, 50 kilograms and carrying it for 100 kilometers, that's one type of device. If it's 200 kilograms or more, that's a different type of device, and each device has its own cost. So, for example, we'll obviously set our production costs so that these devices are competitive in the market, so to speak, in order to ensure that we can make some profit from them. But for example, when it comes to smaller devices, we can't set a high profit margin because then they wouldn't be competitive. Low profit on small devices is just a fact. Good profit on medium-sized devices is also obvious. And huge profit on large devices is also indeed a very obvious fact. And that's the plan, or rather, the strategy that we're following. Many companies that are also being established as startups and are making small airships, they base their economic model on the idea that these small devices will ultimately, in the long run, pay off the process of forming the company itself, in other words, the startup. But that immediately makes it unprofitable, so obviously not every kind of airship, especially the small ones, gets built and launched. It's definitely good that we've taken a broader look at the whole industry. So the strategy is this: undercut prices on the small devices and then compensate for that loss with the bigger ones. Because, for example, the price at which the Nova 35 airships, let's say the 10-ton models, will be offered for sale is such that, in reality, just one single year of serial production and ongoing development will indeed more than pay back all of the investments made, all of the investments, to be clear, all of the investments. You don't need to be a genius, an expert, or write some kind of brilliant, detailed business plan here. An airship is truly a unique and remarkable means of transportation, offering special and distinctive capabilities. If it's made with quality and sold at reasonable market prices, it'll sell like hotcakes.
By the way, I've actually seen some specific calculations myself. I don't know, we don't publish them, it's just that those aren't our devices. Maybe it makes sense for us to publish what was calculated even for the Atlant. For example, I've seen those calculations.
There are economic models that suggest you can build an airship and get rich. If we need to make them public, then let's do it. There's a ton of work, a ton of research. The same goes for the Moscow Aviation Institute. They have an economics department too, and a specialist we know works in that department. He even wrote a separate program for automatically creating business plans for the mass production of airships. So, there aren't just mathematical models. There's even software for writing a business plan. But what's the point of that software if there's no actual airship yet? So yeah, look, Alexander Nikolaevich Kirillin has done a lot of macroeconomic research on integrating airships into the transport and logistics system. Their profits are in the trillions and billions. The numbers are insane. These are numbers that are, quite honestly, so massive and difficult to fully grasp that it's hard to even wrap your head around them, to put it simply. There's a book by Alexander Nikolaevich Kirillin, a monograph. You can find it online and read it, and everything will become clear to you right away. If AERONOVA has any kind of business plan, of course they will. Because you know, a business plan. Look, we built our first airship, the Nova 01. We didn't even plan on making it. It ended up being like a second, well, like a small model of the Nova 2 airship. We showed it could fly and found a customer for little ad airships. Did we expect that? We knew it was going to happen. Preparing for mass production at reasonable prices. Yes, ready, I'll calculate. How much are we going to make from this? We'll make a profit. But on small devices, the margins will be small. But the very fact that we'll already be involved in the business and making some profit will show that we're in the market and that we're capable of solving this task not just technically, but economically as well. If there are bigger airships, it's the same. For example, that client wanting airships of about 8,000 cubic meters basically needs a fleet. Naturally, when we develop and mass produce these airships, we'll be building in a profit margin. The profit margin on this particular type of airship will already be able to reach, well, if with the smaller ones you can generally factor in anywhere from just a few to several dozen % profit. Here, as we have observed, it's already several dozen % or more. In cargo vehicles, this is hundreds, if not thousands.
All right, let's keep going. There are a ton of questions. We'll try to get through them now.
The term business plan is overused. Everyone repeats it, but few actually understand what it really means. There's a specific business goal. For example, a particular client comes along and says, I need a certain number of these airships by a certain date. You can plan whatever you want. A business plan is mostly, like a story for when you enter a market that's already oversaturated, and you're trying to come up with something clever. You try to cut expenses, arrange supplies, juggle things, hoping you'll hit it big.
Or when you have perfect conditions, like when you know for sure what's going to happen tomorrow, how much things 1, 2, and 3 will cost. How much you'll have, I don't know.
Perfect conditions would be, everyone needs airships. There are no airships, and we're about to set the rules in this market. You can't mess around, because if we do that, we'll just scare everyone off. If no one else can make an airship for you, I could sell it for trillion billion. Obviously, you can't behave like that, like we said before. Or like I said before, the airship market, well, the aviation airship market is already established, and everything is super expensive. But we have the opportunity to revive it by lowering the price and simply flooding the world with airships. So don't worry about making money.
Next question about the airship. Will it be possible to see it in person? Will there be any demonstrations organized?
Yes, of course there will be. When exactly, it's not clear yet, but most likely we'll definitely do it this summer.
I'd like to point out that the cleverest ones have already managed to visit. You could say, we can show footage with our African partners who actually attended the tests.
Of course, we agreed to let them in since they came all the way here. But still, these were factory tests, and anything could have happened. Things might not have gone according to plan. But honestly, what's there to hide? If something had gone wrong, it would have been obvious anyway. It's just that the process itself, we had to organize this demonstration specifically. I mean, we have an ongoing production process there. And honestly, we didn't really want to interrupt the production just to put on some kind of demonstration. So that's why we're going to organize it separately, like a mini show or something, once we finish all our research on this little device. When the process of its continuous flight finally begins, then we'll set up a separate area with its own program, where everything will be well thought out and safely tested. And then yes, of course, that's exactly what we should do. Come by, take a look, get acquainted.
There's also a question about whether we're interested in participating in electrical engineering or electric transport exhibitions in Kazakhstan.
No, probably not. I think that actual flying aircraft in the sky are the best kind of exhibition.
But if, after all, someone wants to invite AERONOVA somewhere, how can they get in touch?
Look, the question actually sounds like it's meant for the previous project, for LLC Sovelmash.
Well, by the way, maybe that's the case. There are no specifics here. I think the right thing to do is to contact AERONOVA directly, or directly contact LLC Sovelmash. Basically, anything that could be beneficial, of course, should be considered. Not just in general, but for a specific exhibition.
Yeah, look, just for the sake of checking a box, of course, we'll take part in some exhibitions. But exhibitions are mainly held to find customers. And as it happens, the airship is basically its own advertising banner. You really can't come up with a better banner. It's the one that's huge in the sky, right above your head. With the small one, we saw this works. Our strategy is correct. Why go to exhibitions, tell people, make promises? It's easier to just launch it into the sky and everything starts happening.
Will the second version of the Nova 01 be in the same state of readiness? Can it be certified, approved for flights and commercial operation? Is there any progress in this area?
Look, for small unmanned aerial vehicles, there is currently a procedure that allows you to certify a drone in a declarative manner. So yes, it will be certified. It is planned to be commercially operated by those customers who have already come forward and said they would gladly buy a batch and use them for advertising purposes. There are also other customers who want to use them for monitoring. In general, for both groups, we will prepare all the necessary procedures. Our goal is to resolve all these issues as planned by the fall.
Nova 01 flies fast. Share flight details, max speed, altitude, payload.
The altitude is up to 1.5 kilometers, and the maximum speed is around 80 kilometers per hour. We haven't accelerated it to that speed yet, because there is a specific testing procedure we follow. Testing at maximum speed, hard landings, and so on. All of that happens at the end of the testing program for obvious reasons. You could simply, actually, lose the device. It can fly with a payload of up to 20 kilograms. That's in loitering mode, when it takes those 20 kilograms and calmly loiters. So it's not rushing at maximum speed, but just smoothly cruising around a designated area or even just holding a position. It can stay there for up to 10 hours in that mode. But if it picks up those 20 kilograms, switches the main propellers to maximum, accelerates to 80 kilometers per hour, and heads somewhere, the battery will basically drain right away. It will fly a maximum of 150 kilometers, most likely. And that's with zero wind. If there's a tailwind, it'll go farther. If there's a headwind, it'll go less, obviously. But the Nova 01, it's not meant for commercial use. The one that will be made for commercial purposes will be a bit faster and will have more batteries installed. In general, we'll talk more about it a bit later, once we've put it together.
Can you tell us how the airship behaves in a crosswind? At what wind speed can it hold its position? How much does wind actually affect its flight performance? At what wind speed does the weather become unsuitable for flying?
Well, look, it can stay in the sky in any wind. It can basically match its speed to the wind, so even if the wind is blowing 100 kilometers per hour, it's fine. If it moves along with the air current, it's not a problem, as long as the wind is going in the same direction, of course. If the goal is to hold a fixed position, then it has a maximum calculated speed of over 80 kilometers per hour. So, as long as the wind speed is up to a little over 80 kilometers per hour, it can face into the wind, use its propellers, and easily stay in place. But obviously, not for long. Because this particular device, because its batteries weren't designed for that. If it needs to move forward and the wind is blowing from the side, naturally, it will move at an angle. So it won't fly straight, but rather, it will move with its nose slightly into the wind. In general, a dirigible in the wind feels a lot like a sailboat. Anyone who has sailed knows that you can even sail against the wind, more or less. That's the logic behind piloting a dirigible. You don't need to fight the wind if it's from the side, just use it correctly. In most cases, to do that, you completely need to thoroughly understand the basic principles and have either the appropriate skills or the right algorithms. If you turn the dirigible sideways to the wind, it will get blown away hard. But why would you do that? On the ground, it should be feathered, meaning it should turn its nose into the wind. And up in the air, when it's flying, it also needs to take the right position, choose the right course, and make adjustments. Obviously, all in accordance with the current weather and wind conditions. A small dirigible, probably up to 15 meters per second, can quite easily take off and land. It can handle that. The bigger the dirigible, the more capabilities it has. For large dirigibles, takeoff and landing are designed for wind speeds up to 35 meters per second, storm-level winds which rip roofs off houses. The main challenge is ground-level takeoff and landing, because when it's up in the air, It doesn't matter what the wind is like. If you get blown in one direction, you just turn, adjust your course and go around it. But when you need to dock at a specific spot or land on a particular platform, that's when the wind becomes a real problem. So for large dirigibles, let's say it's about 30 meters per second, maybe a bit less. Smaller takeoff and 15 meters second winds, strong wind. We'll see how it works out in practice. Because back when quadcopters first appeared, even the slightest wind would tip them over. Now, they can fly in windy conditions without trouble. Control systems and computer algorithms have opened up new possibilities. And no one has really tried this with airships yet. But we're going to give it a shot, and we're already working on it. We'll see just how much the quality of an aircraft equipped with a brain can improve.
How does redistributing shares impact those with installment plans who couldn't or wouldn't pay? But here I'll say that from the very beginning, we made it clear that participating in the project at the pre-launch stage is truly a huge privilege, because the terms were extremely favorable, and they were necessary for the project to get off the ground quickly, which is exactly what happened. At the same time, as we clearly stated from the very beginning, the shares sold during the pre-launch could not be increased later on. If you abandoned your installment plan and stopped making payments, you won't be able to restore those packages, so there were strict limitations, which we talked about from the very beginning. And despite that, some people took out installment plans and, for whatever reason, didn't finish paying them off. According to the original agreement, which we publicly announced, we put those shares up for sale. That's where they came from. So, for example, if you abandoned your installment plan and didn't pay it off, unfortunately, you won't be able to get it back. Your shares were the ones put up for sale as part of the promo campaign we mentioned today. So if you've changed your mind after watching our broadcast, your only option now is to go and buy at the first stage. The terms are still very good. It's just the beginning of the project, so you still have time to participate under the current conditions. Vedya, I have a question for you about helium and how quickly it gets used up. Are there any more precise figures? I think there were some percentages mentioned.
Yes, actually, there is indeed a well-established mathematical model for the operating costs of the airship, which comprehensively includes everything, even the pilot's salaries. According to this model, the unmanned version is, at the very least, at least twice as cheap to operate, if not even more so. And in reality, the cost of refilling helium is only about 1 to 3% of the total. Compared to all the other technical work and maintenance required, like you do regular maintenance on a car, an airship will also require regular maintenance. And the cost of this maintenance, or more precisely, the cost of helium within it, is at most up to 5% overall. So, it's a negligible expense. And regarding leaks, we're currently measuring leaks on fabric that isn't even the best quality. And once again, it's confirmed that the leaks are minimal, and you might not even notice them for months. And the cost of refilling is just as I mentioned earlier, relative to the overall maintenance. So it's really not an issue at all. It's great that modern materials have reached such high gas retention properties. Now, it's great that unmanned technologies have emerged, since they let us cut most costs. We need to address the remaining expenses, mainly the engine's resource. And that's exactly the direction we're moving in. We are significantly increasing the intervals between scheduled maintenance activities on our system, which means that the time between each required maintenance session will now be much longer than before. So, for the rest, we need to cut down on maintenance costs. Helium is already acceptable as it is.
How do airships deal with icing? And overall, how much does a wet airship versus a dry one affect lifting capacity?
Naturally, an airship shouldn't absorb moisture, and that's exactly why the materials are chosen so carefully. Otherwise, it simply won't take off. If the fabric covering such a large area and volume absorbs moisture, it has a very significant impact. That's why it's a real problem. So the airship needs to be able to shed snow from itself, meaning it has to be heated. The gas also needs to be heated, and that's where our power unit comes in. It generates a lot of volumetric heat, meaning it doesn't just heat up one spot, but produces a large amount of warm, well-prepared air. For example, in regular cars, the exhaust gases are released overheated, the catalytic converters are glowing red, and so on and so forth. But here, in this process, we produce consistently acceptable temperatures with a large volume of air, which naturally allows us to efficiently heat such large volumes of gas. So, all of this is carefully handled by the power unit that we're currently designing. Regarding moisture absorption, of course, the materials they're made from shouldn't absorb any moisture at all. Things like rain and dew are shaken off by vibrations and similar effects. Make sure it doesn't freeze, heat if needed, and prevent moisture absorption. If moisture is absorbed, mold forms. If mold forms, it loses strength and holds less gas. So obviously, you can't allow that to happen.
Are there any specific regulations or legal requirements that need to be met in order to lift a person in a dirigible?
Of course, there are. The craft has to be certified. It doesn't necessarily have to be type certified, but it can receive a certificate as a single specimen. It's not that difficult. There are a lot of hobbyists in our country who build their own autogyros and small planes, and they easily get these kinds of certificates, receive tail numbers, and fly. It's more complicated when you're charging someone money to take them on board. In that case, you need type certification according to the law, and that's a very serious process. But creating a dirigible where people can fly of their own free will and for free, that's a well-known and straightforward process. And naturally, our first craft will go through this exact procedure.
How is the dirigible specifically safeguarded from lightning? And is there any action plan in place if communication with the operator is lost?
It's protected from lightning as any aircraft, airplanes, helicopters, equipment with lightning protection. That was done long ago, nothing new. The dirigible has this built in as its large surface area gets static electricity and needs to be discharged. And so, it's all integrated there, the whole system. In general, it's really essential for a dirigible. In fact, that's the number one issue. When coronal discharges start to occur on it, which, of course, damage the equipment has to be prepared for that. Fortunately, we have a department that handles our in-house instrument engineering, and they're familiar with all of this and immediately build in all the necessary protections. Besides, we're planning to ionize the gas inside ourselves. In other words, we're practically creating our own lightning inside the airship, and that's all taken into account from the start. Basically, the instruments are designed to be protected, and the airship itself is protected as well, right? And the second part of the question?
What if the connection with the operator is lost?
Naturally, it will safely and automatically carry out the last flight mission saved on the onboard computer, or it will switch to some emergency flight mission in the event of a shutdown or a loss of connection. But it will only follow the algorithms we program into it. If it loses connection, it will quickly check. If the engines are fine and everything else is normal, it will keep carrying out the flight mission, for example. That's if it has that kind of algorithm. You could also program it with a return-to-home algorithm if its current mission is like the one now. For example, it's flying, and these are test flights, meaning it's not carrying out any specific task. These are just test flights. Right now, during test flights, if it loses connection, it shuts down all the engines, turns everything off, and simply starts to gently descend to the ground. You can program it to return home. You can program it to continue carrying out its flight mission. In general, it all just depends on the specific situation and the specific task, basically what it's doing up there in the air at that moment. For now, it just shuts everything down, period. Because we're flying over the airfield area. If it flies out in this state beyond the airfield area, when you press the button, a special membrane gets burned through, and it starts descending even more rapidly, but in general, it shouldn't come to that anyway. When we fly outside airfield area, it follows the flight plan to return and land. And then, when we're carrying out some kind of mission, for example, a commercial one, like flying to Pointa, it will just keep heading there, that's all.
Has all the equipment been purchased, or is the process of searching for missing items still ongoing? We talked about this today.
Search is complete. Now it's payment and delivery. No, not everything has been purchased yet. We still have equipment left to buy.
So, does the airship have a digital map of the area with restricted zones such as power lines, airport runways, and so on, for example?
No, there isn't anything like that, but it does have computer vision, so it can recognize obstacles, barriers, or anything else on its own. Of course, this computer vision system still needs a bit more training data to reach its full potential and deliver more accurate results. Fortunately, students from almost every IT field who are passionate about technology and innovation are actively working on gathering and preparing that data these days. So there's really no problem here, which means creating internal maps probably isn't even necessary. All of this will be on board anyway. If its computer is working, then its vision is working. If its vision is working, it will recognize any object and fly around it. Do we need to put this into some kind of maps so it can fly blindly? Maybe we could. Will we actually do it? If there's an easy and brilliant way to make it happen, then we will.
What metal will be used in the construction of the rigid airship, and why that particular one? Does it make sense to use composite materials?
Well, everything has its own practicality. For example, so far, everything we're designing, we're planning to make entirely out of aluminum. It's just that the production cost is clear. The characteristics are in no way inferior to those of composite materials. The speed is higher, and the manufacturing process is simpler. But there are components, for example, that absolutely have to be made from composites. That's up to the engineers to decide, and of course, we can't just replace those with aluminum. If it's specified as composite, then it has to be composite. But as for what material to use for building a large, rigid airship, we're still currently conducting various studies on that. Several different concepts for spatial structures made from different materials have been proposed, including advanced composites. Right now, we're running simulations, modeling a specific framework, applying loads to it, and analyzing its properties. For example, you can combine the same elements in an endless number of different ways. Overall, this process is now happening in parallel with evaluating the production cost. In other words, you can sacrifice a bit of strength characteristics and make it 10 times cheaper. So, if it's about strength, sure, we could theoretically build a fully composite airship out of advanced carbon fiber material. That might sound really cool, perhaps even impressive, but everything has to make sense from a practical, real-world standpoint in the end.
So, what's the payload capacity of the Nova 8?
4 tons.
So, your plans include producing both blimps and rigid airships. Aren't you worried about spreading your existing resources and efforts too thin? Goodyear only built blimps, while Zeppelin only made rigid airships.
No, we're not worried. On the contrary, we've chosen this as our path, to progress from small airships to large rigid ones. And this is probably the only right decision, because trying to build a large rigid airship right away is... Imagine you gather together a dedicated team of athletes and say, hey, let's go win the Olympics, starting right at this very moment. But have you even played a single match together? Of course not. You need to have some practice, experience, and so on. So large rigid airships are only feasible above a certain size. It's not practical to build rigid airships smaller than 35,000 cubic meters. They must be non-rigid. And at the same time, there's no point in immediately building something 35,000 cubic meters or larger. It's just not possible right now. We'd have to design and construct a hangar, and we could just stop everything we're doing now and spend the next 3 years building it. How does that sound? Not a single craft would get off the ground. That just seems like the wrong strategy. That's why our strategy is not to spread ourselves too thin, but to evolve from small to large, to keep moving forward, to show and demonstrate to everyone that our airships can fly, that they're useful, to fine-tune our processes, and to keep progressing.
So, are we keeping an eye on whether our competitors might overtake us?
Well, more power to those competitors. Let them emerge, let them overtake us. This market is enormous, and the airship industry as a whole is about to go through a significant phase where, once again, it will have to prove the true necessity and value of airships in the world. The sooner that important process happens, the better it will ultimately be for our company as well. So let everyone build, let them fly. I'm sure everyone has their own vision, their own internal customer. Take the Chinese, for example. They're currently working for their domestic market, producing small tourist airships. The Germans have been doing this for a long time, making their Zeppelins, those soft tourist airships with internal frames. And that's fine, they're putting them up for sale. ABC, company in America, is also focused on their domestic market. But no one is taking the path of creating large transport airships. Sergey Brin, for example, mentioned that he would do it, and he actually started with a large one. But things didn't go very smoothly for him. The process isn't that quick. It's not like bam, and suddenly we just appeared out of nowhere. As far as I know, we're the only ones with such an ambitious idea. Basically, all the companies and teams are well known, and the projects they're working on are clear. Good luck to everyone. Let's work together. Let's see what comes out of it.
We were talking about large propellers for thin air, but wouldn't it be easier to use a standard propeller and increase RPM with a controller as air gets thinner? Higher rotation speed means higher engine efficiency, right?
Well, it's not all that straightforward, actually. The graphs aren't linear. There are intersection points. It's like It's really hard to explain all of this. But yes, there isn't a single point where you get maximum engine efficiency, but rather a range. If there are several variables, then yes, it's not a point, it's a range. And you end up choosing the best option within that range. The better option is usually a larger propeller. Because even though engine efficiency increases, consumption also goes up at higher RPMs. For example, there's a well-known fact among people in aviation that, in most cases, a large propeller has greater engine efficiency than a small one. And the electric motor is designed for the required RPMs to achieve maximum engine efficiency. You don't just find a motor on the market with engine efficiency at 5,000 RPM, but you need it to run at 1,000 RPM. You can request a motor from the manufacturer with maximum engine efficiency specifically at the operating conditions you need, and you'll get that motor. But when it comes to the propeller itself, it's true. Its engine efficiency is higher the larger it is. That's why those same small impellers consume a lot of power to produce the same thrust that a large propeller can generate while using several times less electricity. So for now, the large propeller is still the winner.
Have you estimated the market capacity in Russia for the Nova 01? How many units would be needed?
It's hard to say. According to detailed expert assessments provided by both companies and specialists at the aviation company AERONOVA, it is estimated that around 100 units would likely be necessary to fulfill the projected requirements.
Nova 01, right? Yes. So, have you already modified or made any adjustments to the engine rotation gears on the Nova 01? I just wanted to check.
Yes, right now there are sprockets with a chain installed. Because, yes, there were a few options. Either buy those gear wheels for the toothed belt and adapt them. Buying them means waiting again. Adapting them also takes time. The ones 3D printed are okay, of course, but not great. In the end, we went with sprockets and a chain simply because it could be done quickly, reliably, and easily, and it gets the job done.
Regarding ticket purchases and flight schedules, is there a plan to create a separate website, or will it be on the same site where payment for packages currently happens?
Look, you probably mean some kind of tourist flight, and of course, everything will be set up for that, a separate process with its own website.
So, maybe what people mean is just to see the working airship, or maybe some are hoping they'll actually get to fly on it as well.
Well, if we look at the current options, are you planning to sell tickets or not?
It's not about tickets, it's about the opportunity to come and watch the launch in person. So, not flying on the airship itself, but watching the launch.
But that's free for all investors.
Yes, it's free. But to organize a group, we need to plan everything out. We can't invite everyone at once. So first, we'll invite those who receive this ticket. The plan was actually like this. First invite those who have already invested, then those who haven't invested yet, and also invite those who purchased this ticket along with a package. Later on, once we get settled, what kind of package? Are the tickets actually being sold? The tickets are more of a formality, just an opportunity to come and see the launch itself, which we had planned for the summer.
The tickets are being sold.
But this isn't a ticket for the airship.
But if you mean a ticket for the airship, then yes, of course, a separate company will be created specifically for tourism purposes. There will be a beautiful landing page. You'll be able to go there, buy a ticket, arrive at a special area, go through the necessary procedures, take a ride, and enjoy yourself. It will be a separate product, as a separate business, and it will look natural, of course.
If helium makes up 24% of the universe and hydrogen 75%, isn't it kind of funny to fill a next-generation airship with helium?
Are we defying the universe?
Apparently hydrogen is more common.
Well, sure, but it also explodes pretty well when mixed with air. Naturally, unmanned stratospheric ones will use hydrogen, but otherwise, it's better to use helium. Why take risks when we have plenty of it?
I'd like to take a look at all the models that were mentioned today.
We're currently working on the company's website, specifically for AERONOVA. All the models and lots of other interesting things will be there. Please stay tuned. We'll also launch it as part of the second phase.
Weight of Nova 01.
Well, if it's standing there without any payload, its weight is actually negative. It tries to lift off. The mass without the gas is about 105 or 108 kilograms. Shell, battery, engine, computers, frame, everything. Without gas, it's 105 to 108 kilograms. It holds 110 cubic meters of helium, giving a few kilograms of surplus buoyancy. Removing more helium would increase this. The payload makes its buoyancy negative, and you can adjust this up to 10% of lifting capacity. You can go higher. 10% of the lifting capacity is about 11 kilograms. We have extra upward force, so total is 15 to 20 kilograms. Overall, there is a useful payload that it can carry. And again, yes, the airship itself weighs 100 kilograms in total weight, but it can only carry 20. That might sound bad, after all. I agree, it doesn't sound great, but it does have an advantage. It can stay in the air for hours, even dozens of hours, with that kind of payload. This is actually quite suitable for various monitoring purposes. But the main point is this: the bigger the airship, the more efficient it becomes overall. It can carry significantly more cargo and weighs even less itself. So everything shifts as a result. So larger airships will be much more efficient.
Well, and I think this is the last question. There are a few more questions that I'll answer myself, but I'll go through them quickly. I think we'll wrap up right at the 2-hour mark. There were ideas about heating helium with microwaves. Has that idea been abandoned?
Hasn't been abandoned. There are 2 heating methods currently available. One is microwaves, and the other is a bit more complex, in use today. Impact ionization in nanosecond mode. And both of these methods are commonly considered as heating processes in this context. Right now, both setups have already been assembled, and experimental tests are underway for ignition. That's what I call igniting the helium. It gets ionized, and we measure various parameters, characteristics, and so on. I think it will take some time to put together a clear report on the specific parameters, so we can understand their applicability.
So, friends, there are also other questions that aren't specifically about airships. I've grouped them together, so let me answer those now. First, someone asked about new projects. There definitely won't be any new projects in the near future. There are already some ideas, including within the AERONOVA framework, and there are thoughts about what could grow into separate projects. But for now, we're not talking about that. For now, the efforts of the SOLARGROUP team, AERONOVA, and everyone else working in these companies are focused on the AERONOVA project. And of course, SOLARGROUP is still focused on LLC Sovelmash as well, but it's too early for a new project at this point. It hasn't even been a year since the launch of the next generation airship project. Not all the rough edges have been smoothed out yet. There's still work to be done. So everything is moving step by step. The questions about LLC Sovelmash are always the same, so I'll answer them for everyone right now. First, people are asking about the shareholding, about receiving shares, and about the internal exchange. Today, Sergey Semyonov covered this topic quite clearly and concisely at the very beginning. But I'll repeat. Right now, we're waiting for the CCR, and after that, a series of events will be triggered, including the shareholding procedure. For its part, SOLARGROUP has been preparing for this for a long time. Investors can submit applications for shareholding through a special feature, choosing whether you want to receive shares for personal management or through SOLARGROUP. This is what you can do right now to speed up and simplify working with you as an investor, so that when the right moment comes, we can simply take your contract, your information, and carry out the actions you selected in your personal account. Everything is in progress here. On our end, we are doing everything that needs to be done, but some processes just take time. Basically, you already know this. The same goes for the internal exchange. The internal exchange is one of the important events that should take place after obtaining the CCR and other events, such as those related to the completion of funding. Only after the funding is completed will we be able to launch the internal exchange. This question is being asked here as if something is changing, but the order remains the same. First, the completion of funding, then the launch of the internal exchange. We tried to be consistent and discuss this every time so that there are no unanswered questions. Next, regarding the shares. As I understand it, this applies to both projects, whether the shares will be traded on the Moscow exchange or only on our platform. Shares cannot be traded on our platform. Only a licensed exchange can do that. Therefore, if public trading of shares is launched, most likely in Russia it will be on the Moscow exchange. If necessary, we can also list on foreign exchanges at the same time. The law does not prohibit this, so the next steps could include American, European, or Asian exchanges. This is beneficial for turning the company into a joint stock company and can attract additional capital in the future if needed. Of course, if we proceed step by step, the Moscow exchange is practically the only high-quality option in Russia. There's a question about documents. If someone has a disability, will it be possible to indicate this in their personal account so that, in the future, if they leave their shares under the management of Solar Group, they could receive benefits? Yes, of course. We will take that into account and prepare everything necessary on our end. But here it's important to understand that if you leave your shares with Solar Group, then Solar Group will likely transfer you profits that haven't been cleared of taxes or anything else. Accordingly, it will be your responsibility to submit all the necessary tax documents, and also to claim any additional benefits if you are eligible for them. Again, we will do our best to make this process easier for you, of course. So, friends, and probably the last question for today, once again about LLC Sovelmash. How many shares have been sold as of today? And how many shares are on installment plans? I saw this question in advance, so I requested the statistics. As of today, we have sold 60,730,000,000 shares, plus some change. As of today, we have a little less than 3.5 billion shares on installment plans. So if we add together the shares that have already been sold and those on installment plans, we're currently at about 64 billion in total. Speaking of interesting numbers, by the way, we've just about, as of now, crossed the mark of 110,000 investment packages purchased as part of the Generation Motors project. That's quite an impressive, round number, 100,000. But as I understand it, we hit that 100,000 mark several months ago. I'd like to point out that the Generation Motors project is now in its final stage. Today we talked about AERONOVA because in AERONOVA we have a major event, the transition to a new installation stage. But of course, LLC Sovelmash and Generation Motors, as well as Solar Group, not only haven't forgotten about this project, they think about it every single day. We fully understand and clearly know that bringing this important project to successful completion is now one of the main and most significant tasks for Solar Group, and the set of responsibilities that Solar Group is in charge of here. We handle those responsibilities every single day. And here's another question that has been asked many times. What about the completion of funding overall? Are there currently any conversations or discussions about this? Is this event being planned? And in general, is there any kind of plan in place at this time? I know for sure that Sergey Semyonov is in contact with Dmitry Alexandrovich Duyunov almost on a daily basis. Sergey Semyonov regularly visits LLC Sovelmash, and he and Dmitry Alexandrovich discuss this issue regularly. So, this issue is on the agenda, and there are ongoing negotiations and discussions about when and how to do this properly. And of course, everyone understands that the project is nearing completion, and the most important thing here is to avoid any mistakes. Because the worst thing that could happen is if, when you have just half a step left to go, you end up underfunding something. That would be really foolish. That's why Solar Group, among others, is currently still waiting for a signal from LLC Sovelmash so that they can make this decision together. Because Solar Group, for example, obviously can't do this unilaterally. That's why Sergey Semyonov regularly discusses this issue with Dmitry Alexandrovich. So don't think that no work is being done on this. Everyone fully understands the importance of this event, and everyone realizes how crucial the successful development and completion of the Duyunov Motors project is, including for the next generation airship project. Reputation means a lot, and we value ours very highly. We can see that we have this reputation, and for that, I want to thank you once again. We see it in the numbers. We see how actively you support the project, and today Sergey Semyonov also mentioned that everything is going exactly according to plan, right down to the smallest detail. Just as we announced our goals, plans, and numbers a year ago, it's actually quite amazing. In fact, when we look back, we truly realize that everything is really working out well. And of course, it's all thanks to you. So friends, if you like what we're doing, go ahead and register in your personal account. Remember, you have very little time left to purchase an investment package during the first stage. On July 11th, the next generation airship project will move on to the 11th investment stage. By the way, right now we're in the final stage of the Duyunov Motors engine project. Yes, you can't get the same favorable terms as with the AERONOVA investment, but there, it's just half a step away from completion. So, everyone chooses what interests them most. Check it out. Look over the promo. Don't miss the promo with 0 packages. I think in a few days there won't be any packages left. And join our webinars to stay up to date with all the news. Right now, AERONOVA has a webinar every week or every other week.
Every other week.
In a week. That is, in a week you can always come, yes, ask Fyodor a question. Gennady.
Special Agent Solar Group.
Yes, we will definitely read all your questions, and Fyodor will answer them. So join us. Everything is as transparent and open as possible to make it easier for you to understand the project. Is that all? Yes, that's all. Thank you all. Likes and reposts are welcome, and we'll see you again.
Solar Group presents. This was once just a dream of the skies, the freedom of flight, of round-the-world journeys. Yet we've made it happen. But what did it take? Our dreams became our goals. Our concepts turned into our plans. Our ideas have transformed into a roadmap and production technology. And the years ahead are booked out with development and construction, components and materials, model manufacturing and testing. All this marks the progress from dream to result. Join us on this journey. Solar Group presents a new generation of airships. The best way to predict the future is to create it, so let's do so together.